Hi guys, today is the 27th of August at 1:02 in the morning, and I just wanted to make this quick update related to the August 31st video that I posted on my channel before the last video that I posted on my channel. So very quickly, I just wanted to point out a few things we've gone over multiple times over the years, but just to update. So over here we have what looks like the Twin Towers connecting us to 9/11, but could also be a nuclear meltdown, which could occur if there was a cyber attack which was an attack on the electric grid or caused a blackout. I believe that's why we have emergency lighting, giving us that connection to a blackout of some kind potentially happening in the future, maybe the near future. We also have the goat's head that spins round in a circle, connecting us to some sort of circular event like a hurricane. And if we do have a nuclear meltdown, we could also have a nuclear winter. Some of those things, all of those things are kind of related and connected. On the goat's head, there is the numbers 666, which is a set of three numbers totaling 18. If you put a little line there, you've got the 31st of August or August the 31st, depending on where you live, will depend on how you say that date. So those are a couple of things I just wanted to point out very quickly in the beginning of the video. And now I just want to focus on the swirling pattern that the goat does with its head and George Bush does with his head. And we see the swirling pattern in the Osama bin Laden scene. So the hurricane is kind of repeated over and over again. Also with the apple rolling along the ground, you get that hurricane sort of interpretation. Now we do have a hurricane, excuse me, which is forming or has formed in the Gulf of Mexico, coming from the, sorry, not formed in the Gulf of Mexico, formed in the Caribbean Sea, which will be moving in towards the Gulf of Mexico. The hurricane's name is Ida, and I found it particularly interesting that if you were to take the name Ida and write it out as I'm about to do, if you were to mirror that, you'd have an I, a backwards P, and what would be a G. Obviously, those three letters, I, P, G, are the initials, or anyway, they're the letters of the beginnings of the words from I Pet Goat. So you can see the I, whoops, do that again. Sorry, using my pen, so bear with me. So you have the I, and then you've got the backwards P, can't see anything. Let's do that again. Quickly get rid of those. Back to the pen. Okay, so you have the I, the backwards P, and the G. That's taken from Ida when you mirror it. So I think there's a possibility that the hurricane interpretation could be connected with Ida, which is a mirror of IPG, which could be interpreted as I Pet Goat. So just keeping all that in mind, I'm going to move on very swiftly throughout this video. The next thing I want to talk about, I'm going to let it play so you'll hear some sound. That's the potential clicking sound from keyboard strokes, which could be related to a cyber attack, which may be why we have the scene in darkness and the scene prior in darkness as well, related to a cyber attack. And that could cause, obviously, a nuclear meltdown. You know, if the power plant can't get electricity, it can't cool its nuclear rods. I'm sure they're not called nuclear rods, but you know what I'm referring to. And then that can cause a meltdown, which if there was an explosion or something like that, could affect the climate and give us a nuclear winter type scenario. Maybe not widespread, maybe localized, but that could be the potential scenario. Let's keep it playing. Obviously up here on the chalkboard, I've already pointed out the missile slash penis, and let's zoom in a bit, how that is formed with a letter A, and there's the number 3, and there's the little 1 just there. which could give us an interpretation for August 31st. We know in this video from reversing it that George Bush says August backwards 3 times. So it could be this August that we're looking at, and there is a lot going on. Obviously the August 31st deadline with Afghanistan and getting the US troops and interpreters out is quite significant. So again, as I go through the video, I'll point that out. But the next thing I want to talk about here is the potential Donald Trump situation. I believe that the George Bush character is a representation for Donald Trump, and the Obama character is a representation for Biden, the current president. And we have what could be a backwards number 2 just here. I've drawn it like an S, but you know what I mean. And then you've got the potential for a backwards 7 here. That would be the number 27, which I've talked about so many times over the years. Looked at it as different days in different months, or potentially February the 7th or July the 2nd. Right now we're on August the 27th. Well, I am anyway over here in the UK. A couple of you will be on that date in a few hours, and I think there's a possibility for this scenario which we've talked about, where I see the image of Donald Trump lying on his back. Here is where his back is, his hair extending outwards. This would be his head, his chest down to his waist. This is his arm, and this is his knee upwards like that. Drawing over it kind of makes it a bit messy, but as you can see, that does look like a man lying on his back. And just from the hair and the long tie, which is kind of purple in this image, I assume that that is a depiction of Donald Trump. So looking out for that event taking place today or leading into tomorrow, the 28th. So you guys keep an eye out for it as well. As the video continues to play, we see the George Bush character lean forward and his eyes go blank. Let's get that there. So you can see his eyes go blank, and behind him you can see this erased image which appears to be in the shape of a gun, and the rest of it is hidden behind the shark, which we believe represents a submarine. So the event I'm looking out for is something to do with the back of his head, possibly a shooting, but then there's also other interpretations I've done, like a brain aneurysm or something else related to his head and some sort of activity taking place at the back of his head. So keep an eye out for that. As I said, today's the 27th. That's the kind of the number that I'm getting associated with the eyebrows on the George Bush character, which I believe represents Donald Trump. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. As we continue to move throughout the video, I'll let it play actually. We see what we're about to see is a series of movements that appear to depict different events. Just before I go on to that though, I had a little thought about my previous interpretation, August 31st, and the events that I looked at in that one, and it's possible that we're looking at these pins for previous events actually could be related to future events as well. So there could be the missile launch from the Gulf of Mexico over to the New York area, and this area here, which is Louisiana next to Texas, will be where the Hurricane Ida comes in over the next couple of days, which I will just show you now. One moment. So here we are on the 28th, and here is Hurricane Ida formed in the Caribbean Sea, but then moving through that little gap which I talked about in the previous video. I believe that's depicted in the Osama bin Laden image, and when he's on the iceberg moving towards that structure where there's a gap in the middle, and it seems as if that may be the gap between Mexico and Cuba. So keep an eye out for any events taking place around there. At the same time, in that same image of Osama bin Laden. We have the swirling clouds. I will show you in a few minutes, but we have the swirling clouds, and it could be that that's what this is depicting, the Hurricane Ida moving in, and behind that or underneath that, some sort of naval force moving into the Gulf of Mexico, where a missile could be launched from, and that could go up the East Coast to New York. And I'm just going to show you in the iPad Go 2 video where I believe that happens. So first of all, we have George Bush about to spin his head round, and his arms are going to act like the waves beneath. And then you have this upwards momentum with his arms, which I believe is some sort of underground explosion. And I believe that that may be connected, sorry for the turning screen, but I believe that may be connected, there we go, to the Mount Etna that we talked about previously, and how it's gotten taller over the last 6 months from all the volcanic activity, and how all of that land mass, or not land mass, all of that volcanic mass piling up on the southwestern flank, which is the weakest part of the volcano, could cause it to collapse into the ocean, or at least partially collapse into the ocean, and that would generate a tsunami, which is what I believe we see next in this video, when we see George Bush's arms move across towards this way. That appears to be the tsunami depiction after the underwater explosion. And then you see his head look over this way. Whoops, we see his, let me just draw it on, sorry. Then we see his head kind of look over this way, as if he's looking up at something going overhead. Now, if this character of George Bush does represent Donald Trump is in Florida. So if a missile was launched from the Gulf of Mexico up the East Coast to New York, it would travel over Florida, and that could be what we're seeing here in this next set of movements. And then we switch to Obama, which appears to be a representation of Biden. So just move a bit further down. In this image, I believe that we again have the interpretation for the number 27 shown on the back wall. Just zoom in with the rabbit's ears. Sorry, just make that bigger. With the rabbit's ears depicting 2 1s, or the number 2, and then the vine leaves here creating a number 7. So the number 27 again. Even these vine leaves here seem to create the letter F. That could stand for Friday, which obviously today is Friday the 27th. So keep an eye out today, particularly for anything happening. But then you have the rabbit's eyes looking directly at the most hidden figure, which is the 8th character out of the blue characters, and he has a number 2, or he has 2 1s on his head. Again, that could be number 2, and then we have 8. So it could be watch out on the 27th, followed by the 28th. And it's possible that the 27th is like the last day before the events happen, or, as I said, something happening with Donald Trump. Because again, if I'm looking at an event with Donald Trump and something happening with his head, we've got this character over here with a dent in his head. Doesn't really look like Donald Trump, but behind you've got the Kala lily, like a symbol of death, and then you've got 1 1 and a potential backwards 7, which again could equal the number 27. So keep an eye out today, going into tomorrow, for anything like that potentially happening. As the apple, for a second, as the apple drops on the ground, again we believe that represents hurricane movement, and again could be Hurricane Ida, which if you mirror those 3 letters you get IPG, or I backwards P and a G, could potentially stand for iPet Goat. So it could be this hurricane that's connected to this video. And as I talked about in the last video, on the apple what you see is a volcano just here, erupting all along the apple with lava spewing out of the bottom. Again, I believe that could be a depiction from Mount Etna or possibly Kilauea. Kilauea is a volcano on the Hawaiian Islands, in the Hawaiian Islands rather, where Obama is from. So again, that could be a possible connection. But there is for me, a kind of a stronger connection with Italy. As you see the foot there, what would be an island, and then on that island is the volcano, which I'll just show you on the map over here. So here we have Italy, and as you can see, Italy is shaped like a boot, and next to the boot is an island. So if you was thinking of this as Obama's foot, and then next to it the apple, if we zoom in, we can see that if the island was representing the apple, then on that apple is the volcano of Mount Etna. So it does seem to tie in terms of imagery: a foot, the apple, and on the apple, the volcano. So Italy, the island, and then Mount Etna. And then when the apple opens, we're given a potential date for that. Oops, didn't get to stop it in time, but I'll still be able to draw it anyway. As I said in the August 31st video, you get the 8 forming from the roots and the shadow, and you've got the 3 seeds in total, giving us that number 3, and the 1 empty space without a seed, giving us the number 1, and obviously the 8 in the middle. So you've got 8, 3, 1 again, August 31st, potentially for when that happens. As I said, the volcano has grown, or we've been told it's grown, over the last 6 months from volcanic eruptions on the unstable southwestern flank, which could collapse into the Mediterranean, and that could generate a tsunami. So keep an eye out on the 31st for those particular events. And again, as I said, we've got the apple rolling across the ground, which kind of represents the hurricane, which will be hitting Louisiana or possibly Texas around the 30th of August. And then obviously you got the next day. If we do have any sort of cyber attack between today and the 31st, then that would connect us to the blackout, which is the dark scene that we see generally all around the video. And then you've got the things like the starlight highlighting the map with George Bush. You've got the emergency lights with the goat in the beginning of the video, and then you've got torchlight, which follows the apple along the ground. So all of those kind of suggest that there's no other main light source, and that people are reduced to emergency light sources: starlight, emergency lights, torchlight. Let's move on. That opening of the flower could represent the eruption of the volcano. Again, that's fire moving upwards. A suggestion we get from the George Bush movements of his arms as that his elbows move upwards, and then the tsunami is generated. That's kind of an upwards explosion, which volcanoes do, coming from the earth, moving up into the atmosphere. Now in this scene is where I talked about in the August 31st video. Let's get the pen out. Why are you covering it? Oh, I can move it. I didn't know that. Okay, cool. So you've got that little gap there between these two structures, which I believe on one side we could be looking at Cuba, and the other side looking at Mexico. Obviously animated depiction of it, and moving towards that gap, which will be going into the Gulf of Mexico, we have the Osama bin Laden character, which is a connection to the Taliban, and to Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and basically all the what are called terrorist organizations in the Middle East. As you can see, when Osama bin Laden is shown, his arms rise upwards. This is a kind of a depiction of two things. Wazoo, which is washing, which is related to water. So as you can see, he's raising up his arms above his head. You've got this whole swirling smoke in the background, which could also act as waves. So I believe we've got a connection to the volcanic eruption, also to a tsunami, but also the hurricane. So it's all kind of depicted in the smoke in the background. It could be waves, it could be smoke, it could be clouds. So if it's clouds, it's a hurricane. If it's smoke, it's a volcano. If it's water, it's a tsunami. All of those things we've already talked about. So it seems like the video repeats itself, just in different ways, at least in the first 3 or 4 minutes of the video. And then we get more interpretation. It kind of goes more into depth of the other events that could potentially happen. If we're looking at a volcano and fire moving upwards, just as George Bush's arms moved upwards in the scene that I showed you, possibly depicting an underground explosion or underwater explosion, if that's related to a volcano, we also have a fire symbol on Osama bin Laden's beard, but it's upside down. When fire moves, the flames generally move in the kind of opposite direction to the way that the flame's moving. So this being upside down would suggest that the flame is moving upwards, leaving the tail of the flame towards the bottom. Again, possible depiction of fire moving upwards, a volcano. And then we have the smoke in the background to re-emphasize that. So if that's the case, it could be saying we have a hurricane first, possibly Hurricane Ida, moving in towards Louisiana, Texas around the 30th, making landfall, I believe, on the 30th, going into the 31st. And then we have up in the clouds over here the number 3 and 1, which again could give us that connection to the date of 31. Inside the apple, which is another depiction of the volcano erupting, we appear to have the number 31 as well. So if the apple splitting with the volcano on it is suggesting an eruption on the 31st of August, we then have fire moving upwards with smoke surrounding it and the number 31 again. So it could be again referencing the volcano. I obviously talked about in the last August 31st video how the moon is going to be a crescent. I can't remember if it was waxing or waning. Either way, it's basically the reverse of what this moon is. Maybe that's to throw us off, but we're just focused on the fact that it's a crescent moon on the 31st, and we have all these other things happening, as well as we talked about, the deadline in Afghanistan to get the troops out by the 31st. When I say these things could happen, I hope they don't. That's not the reason I make these videos, to be correct. I really hope I'm wrong, because as I said many times before, the events that we talk about in this video are devastating events that affect a large portion of humanity, which is not what I want personally, but there may be people out there who do, and we know that depopulation is an agenda. Georgia Guidestones, UN agendas, stuff like that. I believe the coronavirus may be part of that depopulation agenda. So, keep an eye out for all these things that may happen. That is generally as far as I go in my interpretations nowadays, because I think most everything is interpreted in the beginning of the video and it's just kind of repeated throughout. In this scene again, we appear to have an image of the Middle East, circular pattern, possibly representing, get that pen out, the circular pattern up here, possibly representing a hurricane, but as we can see, there's an explosion moving upwards underneath a structure like a mountain, which kind of resembles a volcano. So again, you have that possible interpretation for a volcanic eruption. And then just down here, we've got water depicted as kind of like a slow moving ice mass, but water regardless. Sorry, I just lost my words there. Yeah, water regardless, kind of moving inwards. This woman is appearing to sit on something that floats. So again, we could be looking at volcanic eruption, tsunami, hurricane, as well as a potential nuclear event, because it does sort of resemble that mushroom cloud structure. And if that's the case, then that may be related to the blackout and the nuclear meltdown, or possibly, you know, the beginnings of war in the Middle East where nuclear weapons are used. I think that's all I wanted to really talk about. The main reason I wanted to make this video is because of the IDA reference, which was interesting, very interesting for me. That IDA mirrored being I, P backwards, and the G. I've done the tail longer than it is up here, but you get the point. IPG, IPEC goat, hurricane moving in, possible blackout between now and the 31st, possible events with Donald Trump today on the 27th or the 28th, the 31st deadline in Afghanistan, which is connected to Osama bin Laden, the Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the crescent moon. All those events seem to be kind of, you know, piling up right now. We'll just have to wait and see what actually does happen, if anything does happen. Again, I pray and hope that it doesn't happen. But the gist of this whole video is to basically keep your eyes extra open between today, the 27th, and August the 31st for these events with Donald Trump. Actually, let me do that in a different color. Yeah, so with Donald Trump and the blackout and the volcanic eruption and the tsunami and the hurricane. Did I leave anything out? Oh, the missile launch. Which again, if I just quickly go back, is what I believe the George Bush character shows with his head when he looks up and over, and then it flips to Obama. I want to play the whole thing, just try and get on the point that I need. Hurricane, volcano, tsunami, missile. And then again, depicted in this scene here, volcano, tsunami, or rather hurricane first, then volcano, then tsunami, depicted with the arms and the smoke and the clouds and the water, possibly all being referenced in this swirling pattern behind the Osama bin Laden character. And then the raising up of the arms could also represent a missile launch. And as I said, as I believe this gap, gone past it, but this gap down here between these two structures, I believe that represents the entrance to the Gulf of Mexico. The hurricane is moving into the Gulf of Mexico from the Caribbean Sea, and behind that or underneath that, some sort of naval force that could then launch that missile from the Gulf of Mexico over the East Coast to the area of New York, which appears to be, I can't remember where it is, here we go, which appears to be depicted in this scene. As we see the Statue of Liberty, we see the hurricane, the lights going out, possibly referencing the blackout, and the torchlight going out as well and dropping from the hand, possibly representing that blackout, but also possibly representing a missile launch that has caused that, or you know, something else related to New York and the devastating event. I don't know why they choose New York all the time, but there we go. Keep your eyes open between August 27th and August 31st for any of these events, any or all of these events. You guys have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and may the Heavenly Father bless you.